Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're going to pick up in chapter 36 of Isaiah. Last week we were in chapter 34 and 35, and it was a couple, I put those two together on purpose because it had a contrast between the judgment on God's enemies as well as them bringing a hope for the redeemed. And so those two chapters flowed together. So now we come to very clear history. Chapter 36 is going to come out and start to give us that historical account. Up to this point, we have been looking at the prophecies of God talking to the people, warning them about the judgment that was coming upon them. We see that God had told them about not making alliances with Egypt and some of the things that were going to happen. It was going to embarrass them, and keep trying to encourage them to turn to him, not to trust in the modern warfare of technology of chariots and horses. And a lot of these things that were being talked about, now we see what's going to happen. In 722, Assyria had already invaded, and they had come in and swept away Samaria, which is the northern kingdom. They have been under the oppressive rule of the Assyrians, even though they had not necessarily destroyed Judah itself, the southern tribe that's remaining. The vassal states, the states that King Sargon had left into play as far as just leaving them ruling themselves, decided to rebel. And in that rebellion, they thought because there was a death of Sargon and a transition to Sennacherib, they thought, aha, here's our time. Here's our time to break away. And Judah was right along with them. And so they were fearful. They thought, well, who's the biggest people that we could align ourselves with? And that was Egypt. Egypt had the largest standing army. They had chariots, they had horses, and they seemed to be the only ones that could help them. This is when we got to jump all the way back to chapter 7 in Isaiah, when King Ahaz was coming out, and Isaiah was sent by God to go have a little conversation with him. This location is going to come back up again tonight. But it started all the way back in Isaiah 7, where God was warning him and telling him, giving him really a promise, saying, don't listen to all that stuff that's going on. Don't get faith. Trust me. And he wouldn't listen. And so the rest of the chapters that we're filling in, we're kind of describing the spiritual relationship in the geopolitical setting as well, and how that the people were just failing to really come to him. And the warning after warning with promise of restoration and redeeming and shadows of the Messiah and this king coming and all this happening. So we finally get to the point where God has very clearly, in the last from about 29 on, very clearly said that Assyria won't be victorious. But the people aren't listening. But he still did say that it's going to be a terrible day. It's going to be horrible when Assyria comes in. Now we're at that horrible time. And this is where we're going to pick up. And so right away, you find the difference between kind of apocalyptic language and symbolism to very precise details historically, that even historians can line up and say, this is exactly when they happen. At this point where we're going to jump in, King Sennacherib has already bypassed and swung around and wiped out all the little vassal states and gone down south past Jerusalem. Remember, the coastline was a speedway for armies. You bypass the hills, you hit the fastest way routes, and so he had swung along near close to the Mediterranean and just punished, swept back in to Judah and started taking out all the cities around there. Lachish was like Fort Knox. It was like, I don't know if people even understand what that means anymore. We used to say it's like Fort Knox, you know, it was invincible. Lachish was invincible. Lachish falls, you better start worrying. Lachish fell. Jerusalem's starting to sweat. And this is where we pick up, because before Sennacherib arrives with his army, he does some psychological warfare. And that's what's fascinating, is in this conversation that he's going to have, it's going to show a lot of the mindset of the warrior mentality and the Assyrian kings, the way that they viewed themselves, how they thought that in a lot of ways, because they were so victorious that they were gods themselves. They actually, what is interesting, if you'll listen, and I'll bring it up, they quote almost scripture back as if they've heard it. See, what did God say? I mean, if they heard what Isaiah had been preaching and they listened, you know what they heard? They heard that Assyria was going to be victorious. They heard that their God was saying, that the Israelite gods was saying, we're going to whoop you. They heard that. And so Sennacherib, he's listening to Isaiah. So God is on their side. That's the way they see it. And who's to say different? He just took out Yahweh's Lachish, city that was the most invincible. So some of this as we read, because it's a conversation. And so let's go and jump in. We'll read 1 through 3 and then bring up some highlights. It's not a long chapter either. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. And the king of Assyria, he sent Rabshakeh to Lachish, to the king of Hezekiah at Jerusalem, with a great army. And he stood by the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the washer's field. And there came out to him Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder. So the 14th year, very clearly, historically, nails that down. Remember, there were also cuneiforms, or cuneiform was a book that was written by Sennacherib himself, that when they dug Nineveh up, nearly 1,000 years later, they found it. And so it collaborates the same thing, the same dates and everything. But you notice if we would have read right from 35, all the way through and then started in 36, you'd see that all of a sudden there's such a drastic change now. Now we're in reality. We've gone from the prophet talking, God talking to him, and now. So it anchors, you see, and it deliberately does this, names, places, offices, because now Isaiah is pressing a historical point of view. He's talked about it. He's told them it's going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. What did some of the Isaiah say? That the people aren't hearing nothing. They're like little kids. And that the word is almost like a book that they can't open up and read. They're so stubborn to it. So now he's gone from all of the prophetic messaging. Here it is, guys. They're at your doorstep. These fortified cities sets forward the psychological pressure. Think about that. Like I said, if you took Fort Knox out, you took the major forts out, what's left? What's to stop you from this? The scene is this diplomatic intimidation backed with a great army. So the whole army isn't there yet. What you have is kind of the advanced forces coming in, but it's a large force. But it's not going to be the primary force. But it's big enough to when the messenger comes and he stands before them and starts talking, it's going to have that power. The title of Rabshakeh is an envoy. That's what it comes out as. And so it starts out appearing to be a diplomatic gesture. But really, it's diplomatic intimidation, trying to show them by being backed by that large army. The other people that we see that are introduced here is Eliakim. He's the palace administrator. We see Sheba, he's the secretary, and Joah is the recorder. The king doesn't appear yet. We don't have Hezekiah in the picture yet. It's not actually, he's not even going to show up until really next chapter. But the pressure is being applied through this meeting. You notice that where they met is what I had told you earlier, was the idea that they meet where? At the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the washer's field. This is the exact location where Isaiah had a little conversation with another king, Ahaz, in chapter 7, where God tried to tell him, don't worry, things are going to look ugly, but trust in me. It's kind of fascinating that now, where's your trust? And really, that's what this chapter is about, isn't it? And so, a lot of times we see this. The cities have fallen. The presence of the military is outside. You can see what's going on. These moments are now becoming reality. It's no longer just rumor. The terror is visible. It's gone from CNN News and stuff like that and people talking about it to where you can go out and you can see them right there. So you have this diplomatic meeting. That's what this whole chapter really is about. But there's some very powerful things that we'll see come out in this conversation. So now we start the negotiation, kind of the diplomatic talk. And Rabshakeh said to them, say to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, on what do you rest this trust of yours? Do you think that mere words are strategy and power for war? In whom do you now trust? That you have rebelled against me. Behold, you are trusting Egypt, that broken reed of a staff, which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it. Such is the Pharaoh king of Egypt to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar? Now, so they're very aware. That's one thing that sometimes we forget, but they're aware of what's going on inside the countries. So everything that Hezekiah had been doing prior to them showing up, what the chatter was, as we would say in intel, when you're gathering intelligence, what are the people saying? What's the tempo of the politics? How's the king's temperament? All those things is very valuable information for an invading force. So that's why they're very aware of what Isaiah had been preaching. And they're also very aware of some of the reforms that Hezekiah had tried to do. What did he try to do? Well, he tried to remove all these false altars and get rid of them because that was not what God wanted. The people had been worshiping these false altars. So now, when you think about it, Rabshakeh thinks that by Hezekiah removing all those other altars, that he has actually minimized or trivialized the worship to Yahweh. See? And that now he's limiting God because, what's better? To worship him in 1,000 places and give him 1,000 different glorifying places to go and worship, or one? Well, more's better, right? And Hezekiah, he took him away from you, and he said, you got to come worship at this one. What he's talking about is where? The tabernacle. He's limiting. He's actually going against your God. See, not quite understanding Mosaic law. Not seeing it that if anything, no, Hezekiah is doing the right thing. But that's the reflection of this emissary's attitude. And then he brings up this idea that you think talk's going to do it? Because that's all it's been. Talk, 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 talk. And you know what? You know what we've been doing? We've been killing. We've been burning. Talk all you want. Oh, and by the way, you remember Egypt, that Pharaoh? Yeah, we snapped him like a twig. And anybody that wants to trust in him, now visualize, this is a great picture. A real pokey, like a real sharp stick that you think you're going to be able to support yourself with. If you put your hand on it and lean on it, it would just pierce right through you and bend. It's kind of what he's saying is Pharaoh. And Pharaoh doesn't come. Pharaoh has been put into check. They're going to come back in a few years later and finally go in on Egypt. But Egypt has totally abandoned their obligations and just left all those vassal states who said, here's some money, you come help us. Hey, doesn't that sound Some of the typical historical alliances with nations and trying to align themselves, very similar. And so this betrayal has happened. And so he attacks those reforms. He makes a wager. He's going to make a wager with them, and kind of say that, saying that's the idea, you say we trust in the Lord, but yet you've done anything but you've kind of despised and you've kind of disrespected your own God. And so now he says, hey, let's make a bet. This sounds so realistic in conversation. It really does. Come now, make a wager with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses if you are able, on your part, to set riders on them. How then can you repulse a single captain among the least of my master's servants, when you trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Moreover, is it not the Lord that I have come up against this land to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. So he repeats this idea of trust again, right? Not only is he threatening, it's almost like saying, you really don't have a choice but to trust me? Never trust the Assyrians. It's like trusting Hitler. Right. So it's kind of like, so these emissaries are listening to this. The strategy, he frames it as, you know what? You guys have been in rebellion. This is something also, that your God is on our side. I mean, did he not tell us? Look at the ending, he goes, this idea that, he said, it is without the Lord that I have come up against this land to destroy it. The Lord said to me, go up. He told Sennacherib. How did he tell him that? I don't know. We have absolutely no idea that God sent an emissary straight to Nineveh and said, hey, God wants you. But we do know that publicly Isaiah had been saying that this was going to happen. So it may be a psychological ploy because they had been listening to the same sermons from Isaiah. And so now he's twisting it onto them and saying, because look what Hezekiah did to your God. He destroyed all those temples, those places of worship. And, and we have come through here and been successful against your God. And didn't he not say, come up and punish them? Kind of twisting it, isn't he? He's kind of twisting this around. You're relying on that broken reed. It didn't happen. So, here's a little bit of rhetoric. I tell you what, I'll make a wager with you. I'll give you 2,000 horses. But you got to be able to put men on them. What's he saying? You don't even have enough people. I've got more. He's almost saying, I have so many horses, I could give you 2,000 horses. And it ain't going to hurt my guys. Nobody's going to be on foot. I'll give you 2,000 of our horses. You can't even saddle them. And then he reminds them of this idea that you are trusting, Egypt to provide that for you. Hey, doesn't that sound familiar? Exactly what God had told them when they sent the emissaries down to Egypt. He said, that's a fool's errand. What are you doing? Sending them down there thinking that you somehow are going to be able to make an alliance where they're going to send you horses and chariots. It's coming back, isn't it now? Now it's right in front of them. They're getting invaded. And even now it's a taunting. I tell you what, I'll give you those 2,000 horses you never got from Egypt. Ooh, that's right. You don't really have enough people to even put them on, do you? Wow. And by the way, honestly, your God told us to do this. This is a lot of ways the world twists us, and because of our frailty of our faith, and when God is speaking to us and we read the scriptures, and he's talking to us very plainly, are you listening? Because I'll tell you what, Satan will do exactly what this guy's doing, and he'll turn those around. Just think about the messaging this envoy is saying. He is almost sounding like Satan tempting Jesus. Oh, come on. You're hungry. Take bread here. Turn those stones into bread. Man will not eat by, He knew Scripture, didn't he? Oh, come on. Throw yourself down. Is it not written that you will not strike one of you? You're not going to get hurt. This is what the envoy's doing. He's taking what Isaiah had been talking about, getting the people to try to change and teaching them about the false alliances. Boy, this is a brilliant little envoy. This guy is like really good. To the weak of faith, you would fall for it. But what is your option? Well, he's going to offer them a false sense of hope. But there is no hope in submission and compromise. And that's what we see this as this is a very personal thing for you and me. When we look at what we're challenged with in our lives, when we have things, and maybe it's because we're in a sinful situation, and even in the matter of time to repent and turn our lives around, many times, people will throw that back in your face. Hey, weren't you the drunk? I mean, why do you give that up for God? Really? I mean, come on, your life, is it really any better? Why are you doing that? I mean, look at all the religions out there, and you go to yours? All of them are the same. Don't worry about it. It has not changed. It hasn't changed, has it, at all? So he's attacking the reforms, he attacks and he makes this wager, and it's just, again, this manipulation, and it's meant to create spiritual confusion. And that's what happens to us. People who are weak in faith, you can hear all the sermons in the world, and if you're not really attentive spiritually to it, Satan's listening to those lessons. And he'll be able to turn that around, and you're going to believe that maybe that is what they said in that lesson I listened to, or I studied, or I was at church, or whatever. And that this is what's kind of going on. So it intensifies as we go on to 11 and 12. And Eliakim and Shebna and Jonah said to Rabshakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. Do not speak to us in the language of Judah within the hearing of these people who are on the wall. Now, okay, let's pause. Why is that? Well, first off, we're already pretty terrified of what you're saying. And secondly, we don't want to start a panic. They're already edgy. The whole city's already on the edge of panic. And if it's getting to us, let's stop. Let's try to contain this message to just us. So Aramaic is what they all understood. We get that, but everybody could understand it. It's more of Arabic. It's not quite the same Aramaic that Jesus spoke, but in other words, they could understand the language. Let's talk Hebrew. Let's go back. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. Let's speak Aramaic, because not everybody understands that. Don't speak our native language. We want these negotiations to be private. No. But Rabshakeh says, my master sent me to speak these words to your master and to you, and not to the men sitting on the wall who are doomed with you to eat their own dung and drink their own urine. Hey, you guys, that's right. I'm here talking to them, your king, and those guys who are going to end up eating dung and drinking their own urine. Terrifying. And there's no reason to not doubt, to doubt him. He's got this army behind him. He's already taken and destroyed the strongest fortification they have. So he is using the psychological warfare. This is psychops. It's beautiful. Because whoever's not on the wall is going to find out as well, because guess what? The guys that are terrified on the wall are going to get off the wall, and they're going to go talk. They're going to go talk. And so this crude imagery is also depicting of what's going to happen if we siege your city. It's going to be so bad that the only food you have is what? Dung. The only water you're going to have is going to be urine. Oh, by the way, they don't know about Hezekiah's tunnel. The city actually has a very fresh water supply. Hezekiah's tunnel is one of the most amazing archaeological builds in history. I mean, to this day, they studied that when they started building this tunnel, what they did is they created a passage. And you'll remember now, the way Jerusalem, the city, is set, how do you keep water up into the city when you got the walls, right? But they were able to take a spring and redirect it, and they cut a tunnel, and the guys started digging on both ends and came together. And they, I don't know if you've ever laid down like sewer line, but you have to have a very slight grade so that the water will flow a certain direction. It's like 4 to 5%, no greater than that. And too much, and it'll go too fast, and it'll erode. Too shallow, the water won't move at all. And they started digging at the right grade, at the right precision, and came together. And when they've gone in and looked at when the diggers hit and found each other, it wasn't like this. It was precise. You know how they know? Because there's no deviation when they came together. There was no like, we got to swing over and dig a little to the left or the right or up or down. It was perfect. So they had water. Anyway, I digress a little bit on that. So, it is a psychological warfare. So going on in 13, he then Rabshakeh said, he stood and he called out in a loud voice in the language of Judah, "Hear the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you. Do not let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand. This city will be not given into the city of the king of Assyria." That's Hezekiah. "Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me and come out to me. Each one of you will eat his own vine, and each will have his own fig tree, and each one of you will drink water from his own cistern." You buying that? And by the way, nobody that Assyria ever conquered enjoyed this type of treatment, whether they surrendered or not. They were immediately brutalized and dispersed and let off as slaves. So what is he saying? This idea of this fight. It's a counterfeit gospel, isn't it? I mean, the last part there is saying, one, don't listen to Hezekiah. And there is some truth to it, isn't there? In the physical world, I mean, what has he done to help Lachish? What did your king do to stop and protect all the other people of Judah? And you really think if he could protect Lachish, somehow he's going to be able to protect Jerusalem? And so he's offering him an out. Don't let your king deceive you. So how is that when we talk about it? When we look at this? Well, one, we know we have the perfect king. Our king does not deceive us because he's Jesus Christ. It's our Lord, our God. That's the perfect thing about having such a great king. He's not a man. He's not one that is now initiating reform. We can have total confidence in him. But a lot of times people make us feel like that our faith in God somehow, is going to let us down in the end. I mean, look at the martyrs. When did God save any of them? I mean, if you judge success by the world, you'd say, I don't know, maybe I should just surrender to the world and join them because, that's what this is all about. Again, if you're locked into a physical view of your existence and that's all, then you're desperate. And then you'll listen to this type of a messaging. And we have to be on guard of that because our king's message is perfect. We have to rely on it. This is the struggle that they have. And it's the same type of counterfeit gospel that we have to. So he's reframing this leadership. He's targeting the people's confidence in Hezekiah. And Hezekiah at this time has dedicated himself. He is trying to lead the people into reform in there. And so he continues in this in 17. He says, until I come and take you away to a land which will be a land like your own land. See, it's not going to be that different. It's going to be like land like you have. a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards. Beware lest Hezekiah mislead you by saying, the Lord will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations delivered his land out of his hand to the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath, Apra? Where are the gods of Shephram? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? And who among all the gods of these lands have delivered their lands out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver you in Jerusalem out of my hand? Why are you the exception? I'll tell you why, because I have God on my side. See, and that's the way the world tries to tell you. Why do you think that you're the exception, that somehow you're going to be able to overcome the world and what's going on around you? Because I have God on my side. I've defeated this religion. I've showed that this is a false religion. This one's a cult and all that. Why do you hold on to yours, you know? And that's what and this is where I think the scale is being tipped. Because now what you see is this bold arrogance of the king Sennacherib. Basically saying, I have killed all the gods before me. Every nation who said they had a god, I killed them all. I've taken them all out. Don't let Hezekiah think that somehow that your God is going to be able to take you out of this situation. The fight is over. Give it up. Because the option, if you don't, is going to be horrific. If you'll just walk out, come out. It's kind of interesting because if they do come out and surrender, they're going to be abused. It's very clear. The only real option is to have faith in God. It's so different that when we jump another 65 years into the future, when Nebuchadnezzar surrounds and Jeremiah tells the people and they come to him and say, hey, what do? We're eating everything and they're besieging us, and Nebuchadnezzar, whoa. And God tells Jeremiah to tell the people, open up the gates and go out and surrender. It will go well for you. What they do? No, we'll hold on. We're going to stay. I wonder, it's still between the time of their final fall with Babylon to this time. I wonder if they're kind of thinking, well, we were able to hold on and God finally came through and delivered us. But there's a difference. God promised to deliver them from Assyria at this time. When Jeremiah speaks, he's promising to deliver them by surrendering. They weren't listening. And so there's a pattern that we see here as well. So the end of this conversation. But they were silent. This is the envoys from King Hezekiah. They were silent, and they answered him not a word. For the king's command was, do not answer him. And Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, Shebna, the secretary, Joah, the son of Asaph, and the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn and told him the words of Rabshakeh. So, don't answer. It's strategic. A lot of times that's one of the first things you need to learn in diplomatic corps is, you have to be very careful. It always amazes me, these ambassadors we have all around the world, that when they're having to deal with some of these conflicts, how quickly, of course, today they have instant communications. They can quickly talk to the president and then say, hey, this is what's going on. What do I need to say? They have to be so careful because they can trigger something far worse. And so they are silence. And here, silence isn't being a coward. There's nothing that you can say, and argue about them. This is a matter for the king. They have to do. And so this narrative is going to set up the correct response that we're going to see in chapter 37 next week. Okay, that's the chapter, the lesson for this afternoon. If you're here with us again, like we always say, if there's something we can do to help you in your relationship with God, I hope that you'll take the time to think about it. And if we can help you at all, let us know while we stand and sing.